sighting, but usually it's more of a screeching sound. I've had people describe it as screeching. One guy described it as sort of the sound that train brakes make when a train is slowing down. So you can sort of picture in your mind, so like the sort of screeching, like the metal on metal screeching that people are talking about in that instance. But a woman screaming, that was a new one to me. So I don't know, as far as that particular sighting is concerned, though, too. This was one where, Lon had talked to this person. And, usually what will happen is, Lon will get a report, or I'll get one. And, we'll talk to them. And then if it's, relatively close to one of us, or to one other, like any other investigator with, whom we're working on this, then, we'll want that person, whoever's closest to get in touch with the witness and, go out there and actually do an on-site investigation and look into everything. And so I had, as part of that, because West Joliet, I mean, we can get to Chicago from where we live. We live in Madison, Wisconsin. So, it's like a 2.5-hour drive. And if you're going to one of those suburbs, it's not even a bad drive because you missed most of the traffic, depending on when you go. But anyway, so I tried to make contact with this witness, but I ended up having to leave a voicemail, and then I never heard back from him. And so, usually when that happens, I'm not going to chase people down. If somebody doesn't get back to me, I assume it's because they don't want to talk to me. And honestly, a lot of the time that's okay, because usually what it is people get cold feet. Like a lot of people don't want, they just don't want to have a whole lot to do with this phenomenon. Like they had their sighting. It was what it was. And a lot of people just kind of want to put it behind them. I've had witnesses tell me that they're scared to talk about it because they are worried that if they talk about it, then it's going to come back. And I actually get that a lot from UFO abductees, and now I actually get that a pretty good amount from these Lake Michigan Mothman witnesses, where there's sort of that fear that, talking about it, one, it makes it real. You know what I mean? Like when you talk about something, all of a sudden you're sort of confronted with the reality of it. But then beyond that, they're in a very literal sense. Some people are worried that talking about it is going to summon this creature back somehow, and I don't know that there's anything to that. As if there's some real paranormal mechanism through which you could actually summon a Mothman by talking about it. But what's important is that fear is real, and these people are coming up with it independently. So there's something to it. I just don't know what it is.
Well, can you imagine, Tobias, that if somebody saw something like that, an experience, something that they only see, in the horror movies, can you imagine what it does to them emotionally? What it makes them think about how man has evolved, and then, thinking of it, well, maybe there's other things out there that, we don't know about. The terror of seeing something like that. Mothman, too, I get reports of aliens, Mothman, UFOs every day, from people, not just in the United States, but things like it, like out of the UK, out of, Ireland and things like that. You think it's like only happening like in Virginia or, maybe around the Chicago area. No, it's happening all over. Joe Taylor, again, I think I told you about that. One of the persons he knows, was going to the store and, hit what they claimed was a Mothman. And she got out. She didn't realize what it was at first. She thought she hit a person. And it was standing there, and she thought it had a cape on. Till she saw it kind of like spread its wings. And it was about a 6-foot creature. And, from what, Joe managed to find out even more, it did some damage to her car. But no one ever thought about, well, gee, they should go take it somewhere and get a DNA sample off the dent, on the fender from hitting it. They should have done that because it would have been interesting what type of DNA, whatever she hit. I think she was still terrified from talking to Joe that, part of her mind, she saw a person. She hit him. And then the other part of her mind, she saw something that looked like that Jeeper Creepers, like Mothman type of thing. That scared her. So, I mean, just think of the confusion people go through.
Yeah, I mean, it's a paradigm shattering sort of event. It really does, I think, challenge people's beliefs on a level that just provides its own specific type of existential terror.
It does. Now, hey, Tobias, we got a caller here. Yeah. Who do we have out there?
Oh. Yeah, hello, Tobias and Gary. It's James. How you guys doing?
How you doing tonight, James? And how's the weather in your area?
Humid, very humid.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I'm only about 100 miles north of Point Pleasant.
Interesting. What was your question to Tobias?
Yeah, I was curious. Where was the most recent? Where was the most recent sighting? And the other question I had for him was: wasn't there a Mothman sighting in a small Iowa town in the 60s or 70s, and it was late at night, and somebody actually shot at it? That was my two questions.
Oh, okay, sure. So, the most recent report that I've received, well, there's been a handful. So, the most recent one was actually from April 12th of 2019. So this was just over 1 month ago, and boy, I will tell you, if I didn't know the guy personally who sent me this report, I wouldn't know what to make of it. But there is a colleague of mine. He's with Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, and for his day job, he's a truck driver, and he was driving truck up near Wittenberg, Wisconsin, and that's a few hours north of me, and it stays winter up there for a really long time. Most of what the rest of the country notices as spring is basically winter up there. And so he's driving his semi one night, and it's sleeting out. It's about 34 degrees, and he's close to Wittenberg, and it's completely dark outside. And he's taking this off ramp because he's going to stop and get a soda, get a little caffeine boost. And he tells me that something fell out of the sky, just out of nowhere, like no warning, like nothing. And the first thing he wanted to make clear, is like, Tobias, this wasn't a bird, it wasn't a bat. I've been on a lot of ghost hunts. I don't get startled that easily. I pay attention to my environment, and this thing that hit my windshield, it wasn't one of those. And he said the best way he could describe it was as a miniature Mothman. And this is the first one of these I've ever heard of, frankly. Like, I had never heard anything like this before. Still don't know what to make of it. And I might have thrown it in the crank file if, again, I didn't know this guy personally, and know that he's a credible, serious person. He's not the kind of investigator who's going to make up wild stories for no reason. They're it just wouldn't make any sense, frankly. And so he talks about how this thing it's got small wings, and it's not a bat or anything, and it just sort of splats on his windshield and then takes off. And he's driving this semi, and it's huge, and it's sleeting outside, which means it's slick. The roads are dangerous. Does not have time to mess around. He can't just stop his semi in the middle of this off ramp and get out and look for this thing. Although he does say specifically that it flew away after he hit it, and so he can't see out of his windshield. And this will actually speak to Gary's point from before about collecting DNA samples, because if he could have done this differently, I'm sure he would have. And so he can't see out of his windshield right now. He's got to hit his wipers. He's got to get some windshield wiper fluid up there, because right now he's driving like 12 tons of rolling death if suddenly he's not able to control this vehicle. And so he does. He gets the windshield wiper fluid going, and by the time he gets to stop the truck, any evidence that this thing had just collided with his windshield is gone. And so, I mean, that was the most recent report that I got, and it's a weird one. Before that was all of the Woodstock, Illinois stuff. So I don't know if you were keeping up on that, but that was a little mini flap, all on its own. Before I get into that, though, as far as something similar to Mothman in Iowa, now the only thing that comes to mind, and I don't know a ton about this actually, Chad Lewis, who is another Wisconsin investigator, he's sort of the go-to when it comes to like a specific case, but you might be thinking of the Van Meter visitor. Although,
yeah, I think you're right. I think that is what Van Meter. Yeah, that was what I was thinking of. I believe. Yeah.
Okay, and that actually dates back to like 1903.
Really?
Is when the first report of that came out. But yeah, that is one where I think sort of famously it was shot at or shot or something, and it didn't have any effect on it. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me ask the question, guys.
Okay. Well, James, thank you for calling in and asking those questions.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
Go eat some sugar flakes, frosted flakes, okay?
Good idea. Thank you.
Okay, you take care. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, it was just such a weird report, but because of the way he described it and its proximity to Lake Michigan, like I had to include it. But yeah, I don't really know what to make of it. I've never heard of, anybody. I mean, I've never even heard of anybody speculating on what the reproductive habits of a Mothman might be. So the idea of, there being of a miniature one and that representing in some way like, offspring or like a juvenile, of whatever species that would be. It's not anything that has ever occurred to me, really, because at this point, I'm still trying to figure out if Mothman is a physical creature at all, in sort of insofar as how we understand physicality, like with our current understanding of biology. So
yeah,
it's a weird one. I mean, that's just one of the ones for the Shrug file, frankly, where I don't have much to go on. It's a crazy story from a credible source, and so you just kind of got to shrug, like I don't